Today we have a very special discussion with FAA Administrator Steve Dickson. It's going to be very, very interesting, we believe. We hope you enjoy it. Our speakers today are two. We have, first of all, James Viola, our President and CEO of Helicopter Association International. And of course, we have Steve Dickson, who is the Administrator of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration. We are pleased he's able to join us. Before we get started, I know we are very anxious to get to the interview. If you do have questions, unfortunately today, due to time constraints, we will not be able to take audience questions directly. If you do have questions, we do ask that you use the question module in the control panel on the side of your screen, and we will forward those questions to the FAA, and they have said they will respond when they can. This video is being recorded. If you, or the webinar is being recorded. If you do miss it, you'll be able to get the link from our website, or you should be receiving it by email probably tomorrow. It usually takes about 24 hours for it to get posted to the website. Feel free to share that link with anybody you'd like as well. And with that, I would like to introduce Jim Viola, the President and CEO of HAI, to join us.
Well, welcome to today's webinar. In a few minutes, it will, as Dan said, we'll be talking with the FAA Administrator, Steve Dickson. Our association and the partnership with FAA is important to us and our members, as well as the partnership and the work we do with the other CAAs as well. It's vital to help keep that communication on specific industry challenges and growth opportunities for the vertical flight community. So we're really, really special to have the administrator with us today. But before we meet him, I want to review a couple projects we've been underway and recently even completed a couple of these. Last week I had the opportunity to be in Philadelphia with Leonardo's Helicopter North America facility, where I got to look at the production line up there. So when we send out the monthly VFR, the report that comes out next week, you'll be able to see my discussions with Bill Hunt, the CEO of their operation there. The first edition also, Rotor magazine, or the next edition essentially, will also have a story on Leonardo's new TH-73 training helicopter. This week, I'm actually in, and right now, I'm in Savannah, Georgia at the National Agriculture Aviation Association Ag Expo. And it's been great meeting other aviators from around the US to also include Canada and Mexico. And yes, they are doing a great job of social distancing and mask, and the exhibit floor was good. And tonight I look forward to the awards ceremony. But let's also talk about, leads me into our HAI Heli Expo 2021, which is at the end of March in New Orleans. We are conducting risk assessments regularly, and we feel that we can safely hold an in-person event, and certainly was one of the reasons I came down here and looked at the great work that's been done with Savannah and the NAAA down here. So as the board of directors meets prior to a location or a Heli Expo, next week we'll have us meeting in New Orleans. And I look forward to showing you steps that not only HAI is doing, but also the city is doing to be able to help and to keep their visitors safe. One of the areas that we're working on, most important concerns to our operators that I hear everywhere, is that the rising cost of insurance premiums. For some, insurance is no longer a cost of doing business, but now it's a cost that prevents them from being in business. So we've heard that we need to do something. So to help industry through the insurance crisis, we've established an insurance sub-working group within our flight operations working group. This sub-working group will take a close look at the factors influencing recent changes in insurance costs, and will work to identify ways to ease the financial burdens for our members. Now, to address a couple, before I address, the administrator, I wanted to let you know that HAI has a long and significant partnership with the FAA over the years, and where we have worked with many, many projects. So I wanted to just remind members of a couple, and also, if you didn't know, we had the human external cargo certification for rotorcraft. That was some work that was done, potentially could have crippled or a major part of the industry. We also get support from them at Heli Expo. At Heli Expo is when all the experts from the FAA get to come and meet and see what is new in industry. We've had work with ASIAS with a rotorcraft grant. We've been working on that since 2014, and we're still working on a lot of the rotorcraft aviation safety information analysis and sharing, because the data sharing is what is going to make our industry safer. Is not only to be able to have it for yourself, but then if we can look at it by the different mission sets that are out there, we can help get lessons learned and continue to increase safety in the rotorcraft community. We had, early on, the Gulf of Mexico with the ADSB certainly has been a winner. We had the Utility Patrol Construction Guide, now recognized by the FAA and accepted document for best practices. And then, we've got continual symposiums and conferences. All the safety courses that we were doing last year, this year may be a little different at Heli Expo, but those courses will be there. And just as an example of how we're doing that, we're going to have some of the speakers, if they're in a high risk category, they may be virtual, and we'll still have social distancing in the room, and you'll see your instructor virtually. So that stuff, as well as, the UAS initiatives that are out there, the Drone Advisory Committee, the great work that's being done with the Hawaii Air Noise and Safety Task Force, New York Airspace. So there are lots of things that we work hand in hand and try to represent our industry, because we know that all that infrastructure per se, anything that more than just you do specially, that's where an association, I believe, can help, so that you're not tied up, but you can focus on your mission. And so we'll, by all means, I've asked, continue to let me know, what we can do for you at president@rotor.org. So with that, I'd like now to introduce Steve Dickson, the administrator of the FAA. He was sworn in as the administrator in August of 2019 for a 5-year term. Before becoming the administrator, he had recently retired as the senior vice president of flight operations for Delta Airlines. And while he was at Delta, he was responsible for the safety and operational performance of the global flight operations, as well as pilot training, crew resources, crew scheduling, and regulatory compliance. He also flew in the line as a A320 captain, and previously had flown the 727, the 737, 757, and the 767. He was and remains a strong advocate for commercial aviation safety. And he makes it the perfect person for being the administrator during these challenging times. And he was also is a veteran, goes back to his F-15 fighters in the Air Force, and a distinguished military graduate from the U.S. Air Force Academy. So Steve, welcome to the webinar, and thank you for all the hard work that the FAA members and my members are working every day during this interesting period. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks for the introduction and the invitation. It's always a privilege to talk about airplanes and aviation safety. And I know we won't get to all the questions today, but I can promise you, you know a lot of people at the agency, obviously from your history, and we'll get all the questions answered. So I would encourage your members and anyone participating today, if we don't get to your question or don't address the issue another way, certainly let us know, and we'll get those turned around and respond. The helicopter rotorcraft sector does so much good for society, and we have seen this, I think, in spades when COVID-19 began, earlier this year. In terms of scheduled commercial aviation, airlines in particular, obviously all that activity fell off a cliff. And so our air transportation network, that's so important to our country, we're the most mobile society in the world, and we really rely on that. And it's been a big hit to our economy. But helicopter operations were back to pretty much normal levels by about the middle of May. And whether it's for police, EMS, utilities, corporate shuttles, or hundreds of other purposes, literally, rotorcraft are absolutely essential to our aviation system and to our country. We know that no other flying machine can do the same things. And it's a sector, as we talked about when we were together in Anaheim, which seems like, years ago now, even though it was just a few months ago. You know, it's something that I'm learning about, you know, each and every day. So everyone here knows that, and by being associated with HAI, it's clear that you all are leaders and you're dedicated to doing what's best for the industry and, by extension, of course, aviation safety. My reason for being here, and it's the reason I've been attending and speaking at a lot of safety meetings lately, is to make sure that we're all working together, government, industry, academia, to figure out how, in this case, to raise the bar on aviation safety, but helicopter safety in particular. And there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. December 1st, you know, knock on wood, marked the first time in almost 40 years that we've gone 3 consecutive months without a fatal accident. I mean, that's incredible with respect to type certified and restricted category rotorcraft. And that's not because flight hours were down. It's actually the opposite. The hours were actually up. So I like to think that the period of safe operation has to do with us working together, organizations, the leadership of organizations like HAI, the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team, the FAA Safety Team, and other important aviation safety stakeholders. We all know the damage that accidents can do beyond those involved. They prevent industries from realizing their full potential. They're a huge setback. And we can take a lesson from the airline industry where, you know, safety has reached such an unprecedented level. The expectation now is, you know, there's never going to be any accidents, you know, forever. And, you know, passengers have the luxury of pretty much taking safety for granted, but we can't do that. You know, we've got every flight is important, and every flight, you know, has the potential for something to go wrong. And we've got to make sure that we've got the processes and layers of safety measures and mitigations in place so that we can have a safe outcome. I can tell you, as a former military and airline operations leader, you know, reaching that level of safety is not easy, and it requires a lot of hard work, a lot of collaboration, teamwork, communication, sharing of information and data between everyone who's got a role in the system. That's, of course, the agency, but also manufacturers, pilots, mechanics, controllers, flight attendants, and, you know, the list goes on. And the aviation industry, not just the airlines, is increasingly using SMS, safety management systems, to formalize and streamline this flow of information and data within an organization. It's very powerful. And of course, it's already a required element of Part 121 operations, but we're progressively deploying those practices throughout the aerospace industry. And it's something that's a journey that we will be on for the next several years. And it's going to lead us, I think, to a better place. I know there are concerns here and there about expense and resources, but ultimately it takes us to a place, if it's properly scaled and properly implemented, so that we've got a much better real-time picture of where the safety risks are, and we can be much smarter about how to mitigate them. Part and parcel of SMS, of course, are the practices of flight data monitoring and safety reporting. These are proactive, data-driven approaches and that prioritize safety above all else. And I talked about this before, but to be successful, these programs really rely on a just culture that places a lot of value on frontline employees, pilots, mechanics, whatever the case may be, raising and reporting safety concerns without any fear of retaliation, understanding that they're going to be listened to and that we're going to identify those issues and work together to mitigate them. With a just culture, pilots and workers in the aviation system feel empowered to report honest mistakes, you know, maybe the mistakes they've made, you know, issues without fear of retribution. And that atmosphere gives workers the freedom to report, and they can be our eyes and ears really out there in the operation, provide their management with data that they can use to get a heads up on what might be an accident in the making. Of course, we're encouraging operators to adopt and use flight data monitoring as feedback into their training programs. Certainly the scheduled air carriers are doing this. I mean, all these things need to fit together. and ideally make it a part of the SMS process. And when we integrate safety management principles into the design and manufacturing processes, we ensure a systems approach to safety by coordinating risk management processes and feedback loops between design, manufacturing, operations, and maintenance. So, you can see that we're firm believers in the power of SMS. In fact, right now, we're targeting the spring of 22 to publish a proposed SMS rule that will apply to air taxis, some air tour operators, repair stations, and PMA parts providers. And we're also working on an SMS for airports as well. Of course, you don't have to wait for the rules. You can voluntarily implement, and that's actually very beneficial in many cases. You can identify hazards, head off incidents or accidents by putting safety risk management processes in place. The key is being able to proactively identify and understand the risks in your operation. That's what an SMS really provides. It's not something that is a standalone. It really is a business process that's integrated into your business. And what it leads to is good data and situational awareness, and good data drives good decisions. Now, Jim, you talked about the success of ASIAS, and capitalizing on that success with the commercial air carriers and fixed wing general aviation. The agency is working with industry to expand ASIAS to include the rotorcraft community. And I think this is a big deal. Yeah. We're working with industry, HAI, and other partners to push ASIAS to the forefront of helicopter safety. We've stood up an ASIAS rotorcraft issue analysis team, which you're very familiar with, a key initial step for bringing the rotorcraft community into the fold. It can take us to the next level of safety in rotorcraft. A centralized database allows teams to dive into that data, to be predictive of accidents and incidents and hazards and risks, while maintaining key protocols and data protections that are critical to the success of the program. You can scan the data to identify potential hidden risks from flight operations that, if left uncorrected, could lead to accidents. And then ideally, we would want operators to share those findings with the helicopter safety team so that they can develop mitigation strategies to reduce the risk of fatal accidents for the entire community. There are some other ways to share data and information as well. The Go Local workshops, where we take the FAA safety team, or our FAST team, as you know, industry safety experts directly to local pilots to discuss certain accident scenarios as a starting point for education on decision making. Of course, some of these things have been suspended because of COVID. But the good news is we're beginning to test some virtual workshops where participants are able to weigh in real time on how pilots should react to various challenges during helicopter operations. And a great way to share your experiences and learn about the best practices of others is to participate in our newly instituted helicopter InfoShare program. InfoShare, for those who don't know, is a program that we started in partnership with the airline industry, and it's been operating for a number of years now. But its success is leading other sectors, including business aviation and now rotorcraft, to adopt the same model. And it really is kind of a hanger flying sort of construct where you can share kind of war stories, or there I was type situations confronting certain issues, and be able to see how others have handled certain safety risks. Another avenue, of course, for sharing best practices is through the Helicopter Safety Advisory Council, which has developed recommended practices for oil and gas industry rotary wing operators, easily adaptable to other sectors. And I would just say we also need to think outside the box. And I think that although COVID's presented some challenges, there are also, and you kind of alluded to this, there are also some significant opportunities. And I think those who are able to flex and adapt to those opportunities, I certainly intend for the FAA to be able to do that, will actually come out of this stronger and even more effective. One of the things we need to all look at is that, for the last 15 years, the fatal accident rate, despite recent trends, has remained about the same. The latest thing that I talked about earlier. The latest trend is good news, but we don't know if it's a one-off or if it's a lasting trend. Hopefully, again, it'll be a lasting trend. Because I think we would all agree that no accident and certainly no fatal accidents are acceptable. That's why we support the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team's vision of reaching zero fatal accidents. With government and industry experts, some from the FAA, they're taking a scientific approach, data-driven, urging, not mandating, the adoption of safety proposals that are, frankly, supported by data. We're also advocating, of course, for operators to make voluntary safety upgrades where it's beneficial. Obviously, one of those is helicopter occupant protection features. We know that blunt force trauma injuries, for example, are linked to more than 90% of helicopter fatalities. For new designs, the CERT rules require potentially life-saving protection through crash-resistant seats and surrounding structures, but the thousands of helicopters in our legacy fleet, of course, aren't required to have those features. So, I understand there's always expense to retrofits, but it certainly is something to consider to enhance safety. Other retrofit safety options, we'd like to see crash-resistant fuel systems as required in our reauthorization from 2018. We're requiring this on new production helicopters built after April 5th of this year. But we'd really like to see these same systems available and operators voluntarily installing them in our legacy helicopter fleet. So, we've already got a lot of levers we can pull to help improve the safety record of the industry. We're always looking for new ideas. That's where HAI and your members come in. Please use these events to recalibrate. We all recommit to helicopter safety. I recommit every day when I get up in the morning. And tell your friends, spread the word. Those who can join in today. Now's the time. We've got the critical mass, I think, to make real change. And again, though, the key is really working together. So again, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you guys today, and look forward to taking your questions.
Well, great. That was a great intro and an update on a lot of stuff from the helicopters point of view, and certainly, just absolutely have to say, to the community that was able to set that record for no fatals, that it is so possible. I was having a meeting out up at Leonardo, and we're talking about safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the engineers there was like, so what can we do to help? And I said, well, the goal is zero fatal accidents. We don't think we need to have them. And I think they could stop, they could stop tomorrow. Yeah. And then when the report came out for, all the way up through December 1st, I was like, exactly. I mean, the things that are causing the accidents are, a lot of them, is the human side of the house. And the protection that the engineers are really trying to do with some of that technology has been awesome. So I really look forward to continuing this trend. And I know, some Kim Smith, the former rotorcraft director, I'm sure she's very pleased, because there was too many times in the FAA days that, you'd see the spike and you'd have to come in to try to figure out why is it spiking?
Right.
So I think a lot of the work that's being done, and a lot of it's education, the fine work that Tony Molinaro has been doing, on the communication side. So it's definitely that coordination and communication that is very important. I mean, one of the things the first person I hired when I took over HAI was a communications VP, because I just saw that message, that safety message as well. We need to be all on the same page. We need to be communicating inside our organization as well as outside. So hopefully they've seen some improvements on the communication side.
Well, and it can't be one size fits all, right? We've got a whole, a lot of variation in business models and operators. So, again, I would be the first one to say that that's why it's important for us to be communicating and collaborating to work through all the issues.
Yeah, and so speaking of that, you've got a large workforce out there, and while safety is your mission, you also, personal safety right now is how much effect have you had in the FAA, with keeping the employees safe?
Well, it's obviously been a challenge, as it has been for society. In our operations critical, our mission essential folks, it was having an impact on the national airspace system. I remember the afternoon of March 17th up at Midway. And, you know, we had to shut the tower down. And so I'm amazed at how much we've accomplished in the intervening months. The agency has, as you know, very robust contingency plans. And but this was the first time where you had the workforce and the facilities affected really at the same time. Mm-hmm. So we stood up entirely new elements within the agency from scratch, without the luxury of time, as we are prone to do a lot of times, to research and carefully plan our approach. We had to work very closely with our labor partners, and we had a federal workforce that. But we were essentially relying on state and local public health officials. And so in terms of you know, what the outcome was with each event, it was a real patchwork, you know, around the system. And also we had more than 300 janitorial contracts. And, you know, if you had a facility that had gone down, it was funny, the day after Midway, we had an earthquake in Salt Lake City, and took the tower down. So completely unrelated to COVID, but it was an example of, we had to go to a backup site, you know, and continue to run the tower and all those things. That's sort of what you're used to, you know, as a power outage or a technology outage or a facility outage. And so it's been using our aeromedical team, we were able to really standardize a lot of the decision-making processes. And it took about 2.5 weeks or so, but now we're able to really get up on the step. A lot of our procurement people, on our cleaning contract vendors, and we continue to, you know, use the most recent CDC guidance in terms of how we're handling each event. And then, of course, at the same time, we're doing repatriation flights, working a lot of issues around the interagency and the federal government. I learned a lot, you know, during that time period about how complicated that apparatus is. Back with the controllers, we split them into dedicated teams to, you know, and we were kind of running everything almost like it was on midnight shift. And we went on a maintenance moratorium, which, you know, we do for events like the Super Bowl. So we had a process to do that, but we had never done it for such an extended period of time. And we turned our training off for a while. But ultimately, you have to start, you know, equipment needs to be maintained, technology, you know, you have to have technology upgrades put in. So over time, you know, and as traffic has come back, we've had to get more folks in the facilities, but we continue to work, you know, very closely with our people. And then, of course, in October, we got the COVID-19 vaccine air transport team ready. And you probably read a little bit about this in the paper with all the first United flight. It was actually on the day when the 737 MAX was, when I signed the ungrounding order. I was talking with the CEO of United about the first vaccine flight where they were going to reposition the Pfizer vaccine, and didn't realize at the time it was going to be the very next Friday. So we had folks working over the weekend to pull together all the data to be able to enable that type of operation, because there was a lot of work that had to be done to enable that flight to bring that vaccine, first tranche of vaccine over from Brussels into the U.S. So I'm really proud of what the team has done. And of course, the other big issue besides COVID that we've been dealing with, of course, is the 737 MAX recertification, and putting in, you know, along with it, systemic certification process improvements, which will be a journey that we'll continue to be on, you know, going forward. So, you know, I'm proud of what everybody's done, but there's, you know, nobody cares what you did, you know, yesterday or 6 months ago. It's how can we continue to get better? And that's going to be the challenge for us.
Yeah, and that's what one of the questions I was going to start with. And I mean, you covered so much with the rotorcraft community and vertical flight, you know, of the future. You know, we'll talk maybe a little later on future stuff, but that's, you know, a lot of times as the boss, they ask you what keeps you up at night. And I think you you just, again, covered all the things that people don't even think about, you know, when you're dealing with 50 different states, different requirements, you know, unions, all those issues. So is there something that you, if you had a magic wand, you could say, hey, this is what I want to have done tomorrow?
Well, I think this may sound funny, but it really does come down to data and information. Because I think that the aviation system is so data rich. You know, the machines are generating data, the air traffic control system is generating data. You know, we have data from voluntary safety programs. You know, we've talked about flight data monitoring. And so, you know, a lot of times when there's something bad that happens, there was somebody somewhere in the world that knew that there was an elevated risk. And so it's how do we get that data and synthesize it and present it in a way so that we can be not proactive but actually predictive. And so in terms of keeping me up at night, there's a lot of dimensions to this. And you say, well, data keeps you up at night? Not really. It's really about the information and, you know, do we know everything that we really need to know at that point in time? Because I think there's so much about data and information that facilitates breaking down stovepipes within the agency and really among the aviation community. When ATO looks at safety risk, you know, and when aviation safety or commercial space looks at risk, we should all be looking at it. We look at it from those different perspectives, but we should be able to identify, you know, when we put a new flight procedure in place or a new piece of technology in place, we should all have a shared vision of what the next thing is that we really need to work on, what the biggest risk is that we need to mitigate. And then when you bring the industry into that, you know, you have that industry perspective. So we have the benefit in the US. It's a blessing and a curse, I guess, but I actually think that we can continue to lead the world in many ways because not only are we the aviation safety regulator, but we're also the air traffic services provider. So that's all under one roof. And those missions are very complementary. So, you know, I'm an operator. Air traffic is an operator just like an airline or a company, right? And that's a daily operation. Controllers are like pilots or, you know, or maintenance technicians. I mean, they're out there doing a frontline job every day. And we have the benefit of having all of that in one agency, and that's very powerful. So there's a lot of data and information that's been built up over the years that I think is very beneficial, but putting processes in place so that we can all know about it at the same time, I think is really important. And that's why I harp on things like flight data monitoring and all that. It's not so much about, you know, compliance or who's doing the right thing or something. It's really understanding where there are emerging risks, particularly nowadays when technology is advancing so quickly. And we want to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
No, that's good, because that's I mean, the shared vision is certainly something that helps everybody. It's kind of a new way of doing business, and I mean, maybe the last 20, 30 years, but more of the team approach and the collaboration and the communication. You know, go back to what I said earlier as well. And that's what, you know, as coming in on the international side, and you touched on it briefly about, you know, the FAA has been known as a world leader. You know, EASA and ICAO. Future stuff. I know, you know, the COVID certainly was around the world, so it's not like any country had a benefit of it. But so have a lot of the international stuff been postponed or canceled, or what kind of ICAO activities been going on?
Well, the events themselves obviously have been canceled along with everything else, but we have not waited for that. And so we're finding, as a lot of businesses are, we're finding new ways to do things. And so, for example, this is not international, but I'll get to that in a moment. We did a Zoom for our Florida Metroplex project for NextGen, and the old way of doing it was a town hall. And a lot of times people that show up at a town hall are the ones who, maybe right on final approach, at an airport. And of course they're going to get noise. This way, through a virtual platform, we were able to engage the entire community, including the business community and operators, and not just the people that wanted to show up at a town hall. So, it actually, I think for society, there are some opportunities there to use these tools. And another example internationally is I just finished, Ali Brahman and I just finished 18 hours of international outreach sessions, 6 3-hour sessions in various regions around the world, including ICAO and IATA. And that was, I'm really proud of how that all came together. And I think it showed the leadership of the FAA and the US, and it showed how transparent we were being, and it showed how much we wanted to be out there for the global aviation community. And we're getting a lot of good reviews on that. And there was a lot of work to put that program together. And so I think that as we work through the whole situation about whatever for society, whatever the new normal looks like, that's kind of what we should be shooting at. And I kind of think of myself, if you were on a sailboat, it's like, okay, we had a flight, we had a sail plan here, or a flight. We used an aviation analogy. I wasn't in the Navy, so, but I have done a little sailing. But it's because the nice thing about a sailboat is you're dealing with multiple fluids, right? You're dealing with wind and the water. But so we've had all this stuff, we had our flight plan laid out for the FAA coming into 2020. I knew what I wanted to do at the agency. Those things are still important. It's just I got to put in some cross controls now to get to where we need to go. And so that's what we're really doing now. The strategic and keeping focused is going to be really important. I think we also, and I'll end with this. I also think that we need to be really honest with ourselves about the, particularly, maybe not so much in the rotorcraft community, but in a lot of areas, the commercial carriers, the manufacturers, there's been a lot of disruption and a lot of change. Early retirements, people getting laid off, and instability and unpredictability is the enemy of safety. And we as an operator, whether it's a pilot or a mechanic or an engineer, you don't like for things to change. You want to get a checklist or a job card, and if you come in one day and the flight deck is all different, the switches are all in different place, you don't like that. Even though the manufacturer may say, hey, this is better, it takes some time, to manage that change. Well, we've had, a lot of change introduced into the system and a lot of disruption in a matter of a few months, really in a couple of weeks in some cases. So that's something that I think we all need to realize. We can never rest on our laurels, period. But the aviation system that we had and that we worked so hard to build going into February, March of 2020 is really not there anymore in quite the same way. And again, just retirements, layoffs, loss of a lot of and companies being under pressure. So again, we've got to realize that and continue to search our systems, continue to work together even more closely, so that we can be smart about identifying where those emerging risks might be, because they may not be the same ones that were here 7 or 8 months ago.
Yeah, and certainly, I came in January, and I've been learning a lot with the Helicopter Association International, and mainly, a lot on the international side, and digging into some of the multiple hats that I got when I took on the new job.
Yeah.
Not a different, unlike other positions in the FAA, but for the International Federation of Helicopter Association is a hat that Matt Sakara had as well. And so we have, and maybe we even have him online today, British Helicopter Association, the European Helicopter Association, Canada, Rotary Wing Society of India, and I've had had some of these introduction calls with the 9 members, and trying to figure out, again, it's the collaboration, the communication, how, what can I offer as an association. And I think being a leader in safety side and the data that's so important, and then the data the U.S. helicopter safety team just showed, where you could have 0 fatal accidents, and I mean it is attainable. And the manufacturers want to get there. Everybody that makes parts wants the aviation to be as safe as possible, and the public expect it as well. So I look really, I'm excited to be working in this position now. A little different, but we still do the same thing, and safety being the only way that an industry can be prosperous is it's got to be safe, and people got to trust it. And so that's some of the stuff we did early on, was trying to just reach out to some of our members with a pledge, that COVID clean pledge, so that they would understand that there's a lot of cleaning going on in the helicopters, and that people shouldn't be afraid of using them. So, and as you said, the hours are not down, and that's one of the things here with the ag convention I'm at, is that yeah, they've been working. So this is just to their norm. They're just less people, and they're taking all these precautions, as we should be with COVID, because it's not going to be a flip of the switch. And so we're, again, trying to do that with Heli Expo and at the end of March, and hopefully things will keep getting better.
Yep.
So I don't know. There were on the international side, of course, I've been, and I'm sure you've been challenged too, when you're not doing the in-person events. Now you're no longer on their time zone, and you're getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and having calls with some parts of the world, and 11 o'clock at night. And so it's the opportunities again now to learn what we can do on Zoom, what we can do with webinars. I think we will be more productive as we come out of this, with keep the good things that have worked. I think even the FISDOs were doing some virtual visits and virtual, I'm not, I know that there was a lot of stuff briefed as far as trying to get back out to what close as you could to norm without endangering noise. So it's been great.
Well, I think you talk about international engagement and leadership. These outreach sessions, when we originally envisioned them, we had planned to do 5 or 6 and do them regionally. We're going to do one in Panama for Western Hemisphere, one in the UAE for Middle East, one in probably Brussels for Europe, we would see, but and Singapore, and then there was 1 or 2 more. But so that was our mindset, towards the end of last year and coming into this year, and so I wouldn't have been able to travel to all of them, because it would have taken, we wanted to get these done in a pretty short period of time, because once the MAX was ungrounded, we wanted to make sure that all of the regulators and operators around the world had everything they needed to put, attention on the airplanes and what they needed to do with their training programs and, maintenance protocols, all those things. And then also to be very transparent about the design changes. And we also knew that they were going to be getting questions, from the public and from the political leadership within there. So we wanted to get out there right away. And so these sessions that we put together allowed me to be live, within less than a week with the entire world, really, and spend time. And then our CERT guys and the FSB guys, AEG, and the maintenance folks, everyone, really did a great job of answering questions with the right degree of technical specificity, without a lot of jargon and stuff for those who maybe weren't completely versed in the nuts and bolts of certification or training. So they really did a good job with that. And I think that, this is a tool. A handshake and being there at a meeting is still going to be really important, but it can be combined with engagement like this, I think, going forward. So I think that's accelerated a trend that will be very beneficial for us in the aviation sector going forward.
Well, yeah, one of the big challenges will be AAM, or the Advanced Air Mobility, and you
Yeah.
know, what HAI is trying to do is make sure that you know, the infrastructure, again, you know, working with Gamma, NBA, you know, AOPA, Mark Baker, and all the other associations that we normally would have these conversations at night, because we, you know, especially in December timeframe, there'd be all the holiday events that we'd probably be crossing paths on a couple nights a week. But
Yeah.
having the conversation now, it has to be planned. And then, you know, so are there any big movements on with AAM for any early surprises for Christmas or anything?
Oh, I wouldn't. I mean, you know, the FAA. We're not gonna put, you know, a big present under the tree. But well, we're gonna work together to build it. But I actually just spoke at it was actually UAM. So, you know, my simple brain thinks of UAM as kind of a subset of AAM. But I just spoke at an international webinar that was out of London, that was put together last week. So, you know, I did a sort of a fireside chat thing, kind of like this, with a whole bunch of stakeholders, mostly outside the U.S. actually, to give the U.S. perspective of how we're dealing with UAM and also AAM. So it's obviously an exciting, you know, development moving forward really fast, which is great. And you know, initially, a lot of the applications will look a lot like manned aviation. We'll use a lot of the same infrastructure, you know, initially. And of course, as we're doing the same thing as with drones, you know, we're going to crawl, walk, and run, and we want to integrate these operations into society. As we see with a lot of things with aviation, there are a lot of areas the public is interested in beyond aviation safety, and the FAA gets to deal with all that stuff. So you know, it can be frustrating for the designers and for the operators, because nothing ever happens as fast as you want it to happen. But I can tell you, we are really working on trying to start simple and leverage our existing regulatory framework as much as we can, and then, you know, we'll provide waivers initially. But then we want to use those as kind of pilot programs to then scale operations that can be more broadly applied. So, you know, we leverage what we've done in other areas. The Part 23 cert regulations is a good example where it applies. And of course, that was not designed with AAM vehicles in mind, but we think our framework can accommodate, at least initially, the introduction of these vehicles. The full risk picture from CERT, operations, airspace, environment, is going to be key to integrating these airplanes, you know, into the national airspace. So, you know, we're integrating AAM into our planning efforts. As with a lot of other things, AAM will touch offices across the agency, and we're preparing accordingly. And of course, this is where the stovepipes can come in. You know, it's great to have subject matter expertise, but then, you know, it gets frustrating for the outside world sometimes. Go, well, I talked to this person at the agency, and I didn't realize I had to talk to this other person over here to actually do what I wanted to do. And we've seen this. I mean, I've seen it, and so it's a blessing and a curse. But one of the ways to think about innovating is that we need a function that allows us to take those great ideas and kind of shepherd them, you know, across the agency, and we're building that. Our baseline AAM efforts are really organized around 5 areas of activity, and that's the aircraft, the airspace, operations, infrastructure, and the community. This UAM conference that I was on, I was listening to them talk about it, and they were referring to community as social acceptance. And I think that's, you know, another way to look at it, although I don't know that that incorporates everything that we talk about, you know, with the community. There's certainly, you know, there can be security concerns, there can be other types of concerns, privacy, not maybe so much with AAM, but certainly with unmanned systems in general. and noise, is obviously a big issue. So, we're organizing our collective efforts with NASA and the industry that really looks at what our needs are within these 5 areas. And I would just say, even though, having to get a waiver and for a specific application might be frustrating at times, it's allowing us to get machines in the air, and that's where we learn. We learn from the integration pilot program. There's still a lot more to learn, and I think we also have to understand that moving forward in a coordinated fashion is really important, because although the regulatory authority is federal, local communities have something to say about this stuff. And in Europe, I mean, they're actually, it almost sounds like they're handling these things in cities and in communities with local ordinances, and we don't really want to have a whole patchwork of kind of activities. That's just not scalable across our federal system. So we've got to make sure that we're kind of keeping everybody in formation as we go forward, and that's why collaboration is so important.
Yes, no, absolutely. That was an outstanding answer there. But when you went to function, it made me think about function. Well, number one, I guess I'm responsible for the FSDOs that aren't all, give the same answer as we try to get that standardized. But one of the things we did look at was trying to, especially now that with computers and even more so now that we're doing a lot of stuff virtually, the ability, when we started with the 135 certificate for UAS, we used Richmond FSDO. They became the experts.
Right.
I was reaching out to Las Vegas. I was trying to use that office as the smart office for tour operators, so that we can have an FAA office that was actually involved in it every day. And just like one of the other ones would be the Living History Flight Experience Milwaukee office, because they're right there with EAA, instead of trying to get those experts around the country. But that's a reorg maybe, or something in the future to just try to be more efficient. Kind of like the Uber ASIs is what my mind was when I was in the
Right.
FAA during the government shutdown, especially the lessons were learned there and how to, the challenges.
Oh, I know. Well, I remember when I was at Delta, the Delta CMO, one of the retired Delta pilots who became an inspector there, he became the UAS guy at the CMO. And I'm thinking, why does our CMO have a UAS guy? So, I'll figure that out one of these days if you know the answer, But, as you know, I mean, there's, when you talk about reorgs, there's a lot of different ways to cut the pie. And I know that there's been some good work done on that. Can there be more? I'm all about improving process and making us more agile. And so if there's a way we can do that, we just need to make sure that we're not creating some unintended consequences there. And really, this is where, some of this ability to be able to share information and communicate within the agency more effectively, have common dashboards and things like that, can enable maybe some structure like you're talking about. So it's something that we'll definitely continue to look at.
Yeah. One of the things we had during the government shutdown was a 1-800 check ride, someplace to call, and then they got prioritized, and then we took care of it. But just one last one before we run out of time here. The reauthorization bill of the future, 2023, is there something that industry that we should talk about to try to help out?
It's I would say it's a little early, and I probably shouldn't opine on what Congress should do. We are, as you well know, the 18 reauthorization had a huge number of mandates in it, and we're about 2 years into that, and we're sitting at about, I think, 55% of it done. But a lot of it was put in the ground with, you got to do this in a year, and it was things like rulemaking, which there's no way to get those kinds of things done. Certainly not in a way to get industry input and stakeholder comments and all that. So, I think we'll be able to proactively develop priorities and ideas that we'll share with you and the public as Congress looks to the next bill. Safety is always the most important thing to us, but also, air traffic efficient operations. We've got a lot to do with not only technology, but also with our facilities. There's a lot of work to be done there. And what does the new normal look like, coming out of COVID as well? So, stay tuned for more. There'll be a lot more to come.
Any closing comments you'd like to make?
No, just appreciate the opportunity to be with you and with your members and everybody on the webinar today. And anything that we didn't get to today, we'll be happy to address, and just look forward hopefully to seeing everybody in person this spring. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that one. Hopefully we'll get through this and have a much better 2021 for the country.
Well, wish you and your family safe, healthy holidays, and look forward to seeing you in 2021.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Over to you, Dan.
You're muted.
Dan, you're muted.
Apologize. Thank you very much, Jim and Mr. Dickson. We look forward to having you on in the future if we can work something out on the schedule, but certainly appreciated your insight today. Coming up next week, we have the final decision, the final webinar for the year, decision making when the outcomes are not black and white. This may sound a bit familiar. We had a similar one earlier this year, but we have a whole new group of panelists. Obviously, there are a number of missions areas that share conditions where flights may not work out quite as you might want to expect them to. Obviously, December 24th and December 31st, we will be closed down for holidays. Just a quick reminder, all of our webinars are at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We may be looking at changing some times next spring, but we'll let you know in advance for that. Watch for the links in the email, through social media, and of course in Rotor Daily. There is a follow-up questionnaire that should be coming to you shortly. We do appreciate the time that you would put into responding to our questions. One of the questions very specifically is what you would like to see in a future webinar. We do pay very close attention to those comments. We'd like to be able to provide you the information you need. As always, if there is something you'd like to address with HAI in general, if you're doing something right, if we're doing something wrong, if we could do something better, do something more, please let us know. The best way to do that is to email Jim Viola directly at president@rotor.org with your challenges, your comments, your questions. He does see every one of them, and they are passed along to the staff for action. Until next week, we ask that you be safe, that you fly safe, and we will see you coming again very soon.